So guys, we've been playing older people sandbox simulator, Just Die Already. During our review, we'll give you the highs and lows on this blood spurting, limb flying old people simulator. Make sure to stick around to the end to find out how we score this mayhem sandbox sim. My name's Dan and welcome to D&DGaming. Just Die Already is an old people simulator developed by DoubleMoose Games and published by Curve Games. It was released in May 2021 for PC, PS4, Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. The game is a sandbox style where you play as an angry old person in a near future where people aren't having any children and there isn't anyone to pay for pension due to those ungrateful millennials who prefer playing video games instead of doing actual work. How will you survive in a world that wants you to just die already? As always, reviewing the game with me is my brother Dav. So Dav, what were your expectations before playing this one?
Well, as this game is developed by a selection of a development team from Goat Simulator, and I've played that, I kind of knew what type of game this was going to be. Therefore, I expected mayhem, and that was exactly what I got, with a lot of laughing and pissing about.
Yeah, as this is from the same designers as Goat Simulator, it's not hard to imagine the type of game it is. The first Goat Simulator game was hugely popular. Most people have seen clips and playthroughs of it by now. Basically take that style of game, but with old people instead of a goat. So what are your general thoughts following your playthrough?
It is a hilarious game. It's one of those that you can't take seriously, but as long as you don't try to, then it really is great fun, although it is somewhat limited. The game is very violent, so it's not one to play if you don't like the sight of blood or limbs flying around all over the place.
It is a ridiculous but humorous sandbox type game with destructive environments and ragdoll physics that definitely can't be taken too seriously. It's the sort of game you just play for a good laugh and some stress relief rather than for any real depth or substance. I found you can spend hours messing about in it and actually found it quite addictive once I started trying to complete all the objectives.
So in terms of graphics options, it's very basic, just screen resolution and low, medium or high graphics settings.
Yep, not much to add there, very few options at all for this one.
And in terms of graphics and graphics performance, well, we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but the game ran really well on my PC on the high graphics setting with no frame drops or any other graphic issues. The graphics are okay, certainly nothing to write home about, but it's also not too bad. They're cartoon-like in their style and very similar to Goat Simulator, which is not a bad thing for these type of sandbox games. It suits them best really. They wouldn't have the same fun appeal to them if the graphics were too realistic.
It ran well on my PC with no major issues, although I did notice a few frame drops here and there. The cartoony graphics do have a certain appeal to them, but also look quite dated for such a recent game. It has that bright and vibrant feel to the world, and each area has distinct features and design. So in terms of player controls, well, they're reasonably standard controls with nothing out of the ordinary other than the ragdoll button, which you'll only find in these types of games. The ladder climbing mechanic was also quite unique, but could be very frustrating until you work out how the mechanic actually works. It also has full key rebindings if you need that.
Yeah, so the controls are very simple, just WASD to move around, space to jump, Q and E to pick up items with characters' hands, R to ragdoll and F to taunt with the X button to allow you to respawn. You also use the mouse controller view and left and right mouse click to swing or throw items if applicable. All pretty basic but sufficient enough for a game of its style. So in terms of game story, there's not much of a story here really. You play as an old person that at the beginning of the game gets kicked out of a residential home. You then wander around the local town, reaping havoc.
In terms of game mechanics, you choose one of 4 old people to play as. When you've made your character selection, you wake up in the residential home and have to find your way out of the room you've been locked in. Once you find your way out, you can explore the home before a set of events lead you to being kicked out. Once you get kicked out of the home, the objective of the game is to complete your bucket list. The list is essentially a book of tasks to complete. These can range from eating 10, 20 or 50 items, getting electrocuted by something multiple times, to falling from a great height or finding lots of ways to make your limbs fall off.
So in terms of game modes, there are 2 game modes, the main game story mode and also an online co-op mode, where you can host games or join random games with others. The main story mode is set in city centre location only. The online co-op mode has a number of level options. City centre is for the sandbox style of gameplay, the other levels are all team deathmatch style levels.
So in terms of the UI, well, the UI is basic but intuitive I found and had everything I needed to see at a glance. It doesn't take up too much screen space as well, so I hardly noticed it at times.
Yeah, I haven't got a massive amount to add there. You have a heart icon in the bottom left of the screen that fills full of blood, which is your health indicator. Drop the amount of blood to 0 and you die and have to respawn. The book icon in the top right of the screen is your bucket list, and in the middle bottom of the screen are the Q&E icons. These relate to your arms respectively, and pressing the relevant button hints allows you to pick up, drop, throw and shoot depending on the items in your possession. So in terms of sound and music, the sound effects in the game are crazy as expected. They are typical cartoon-like sound effects and they're very funny and really suit the game. The music comes and goes in the game and is generally tied into cutscenes or particular locations where music might be playing, such as a shop location. The music is quite varied though, and it does suit the game well. There's no voice acting in the game, and instead speech bubbles appear over people's heads when you speak to them, and a slightly strange nattering sound effect plays.
There's some funny sound effects and background noises, but there is limited background music, and so it's quite silent at times when just running about. As Dav said, there's basically no voice acting other than the odd mumbling sound from the character and NPCs. It's about what I expected for this type of game, to be honest.
So in terms of bugs and glitches, well, this is a typical sandbox type game where there tends to be a lot of clipping through objects and random glitches, but they always get away with it with these types of games, as it's usually funny and the game generally can't be taken seriously with regards to bugs and glitches, as they don't really break immersion as they would with more serious games.
Yeah, there are plenty of glitches in this, but mostly just funny, so not really an issue. I did get stuck in the scenery a few times and glitched through a wall where I couldn't escape, but luckily the respawn feature means it doesn't mess up your game much. I certainly didn't find any game-breaking bugs or anything serious.
So to sum up things I liked about the game, it's one of those great games to chill out after a day's work, and it's fun to play. It can't be taken too seriously, and you can take your stress out in the game, which is always good. It's also great for just pissing about in, and the sort of game where you say, I wonder what will happen if I do that, and usually it's something funny. I like the concept of the game, old people being kicked out of a residential home and then going about annoying people, terrorising the town folk, ticking items off a bucket list, all in a funny, somewhat destructible environment. What's not to like about that? The large range of items, weapons and apparel to play around with is great. The humour is brilliant and it's ridiculously funny at times. The sound effects, environment, NPCs and ways you can mess about makes it very funny to play, but also kind of messed up at other times, such as having to find a way to cut off all your limbs and get into vents to collect bonus items, which is one of the weirder aspects of the game.
As for things I liked about the game, well, it's just fun. You can mess about with it when you just want to have a laugh and not play something serious. The co-op mode is also good for hours of just messing about with friends or random people who can join in. The graphics do have a kind of cartoony appeal to them. I wasn't too sure about them at first, but they did grow on me over the playthrough. There's also a good sized open world with a decent game area to explore, with all separate areas which you can go into.
So in terms of things I didn't like about the game, although it's great fun, it has a very simple game loop and is quite limited on its scope and how far you can go with the game, so you might get bored fairly quickly. The town or city environment I found was quite small, and even though you unlock new areas as you go around, still on the whole felt quite small to me.
As for things I didn't like, the controls and ragdoll type physics are frustrating at times, especially when trying to pick up certain objects or when you need to be specific with movement, such as trying to scale buildings. There is no real plot, story or narrative. It's very simple and linear in many ways. Once you earn enough credits, you can, quote, retire to Florida, which isn't exactly how it sounds, but I won't spoil that for you. The controls aren't great at times, and the hitboxes for grabbing items, for example, can be frustrating. It is likely to get a little repetitive after a few hours, and I think it has limited replayability once you complete the objectives on your bucket list.
So in terms of scores, what do you think on this one?
Well, if you enjoy Goat Simulator type games, then you're likely to enjoy this one. It has the same type of humour and gameplay and is similar in many ways. I did find it a little limited on the gameplay though, once you get past messing about for a few hours, and the controls could be annoying at times. That being said, I did have a lot of fun with it, and so for me it's a 7 out of 10.
So for me, on the whole, it is a great game and worth picking up just for the laughs. I do like the sandbox type games for just pissing about in and having a laugh with no real gameplay aim or strict structure to them. However, they do have their limitations, and even with a multitude of weapons and items to mess around with, this one does get quite old quite quickly. See what I did there? So on balance, it's an 8 out of 10 from me.
Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.